The Book of Amos is one of the boldest prophetic writings in the Old Testament, delivered by a humble shepherd from Tekoa in Judah. Amos speaks truth to power, calling out kings, priests, and an entire nation that had grown complacent in its prosperity and blind to its injustice. His central cry, "Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream," still echoes today, challenging every generation to pursue the heart of God through justice and truth. Amos lived and prophesied during the reign of Jeroboam II of Israel, around 760 to 750 BCI time, when both Israel and Judah were economically strong but spiritually weak. Wealth had created a wide gap between the rich and the poor. Religion was practiced ritually, but hearts were far from God. Amos, though from Judah, was sent to deliver God's word to the northern kingdom of Israel, a politically bold move that would not make him popular. In Amos 1-2, the prophet begins by pronouncing judgment not on Israel, but on the surrounding nations. Damascus, Gaza, Tyre, Edom, Ammon, Moab, and even Judah are all accused of violence, cruelty, and betrayal. These early chapters set up a dramatic pattern. Amos lists each nation as sins and declares God's judgment with the phrase, "For 3 sins of nation, even for 4, I will not turn back my wrath." This phrase signals that the offenses were not accidental, but continual and compounded. Then, in a twist, Amos turns his attention to Israelland. He has far more to say. The people of Israel may have cheered when Amos condemned their enemies, but now they are in the crosshairs of God's judgment. In Amos 2:6-8, God accuses Israel of selling the righteous for silver, the needy for a pair of sandals, trampling on the heads of the poor, and profaning his holy name. Israel's crimes weren't just spiritual, they were social. God was angry not only about idolatry, but also about injustice. The wealthy elite were exploiting the poor, perverting justice in the courts, and living in luxury while others starved. Amos reveals a powerful truth. True faith is inseparable from justice. Worship without righteousness is empty. In chapter 3, Amos begins to describe the coming consequences. He uses rhetorical questions to make his point. Do to walk together, unless they have agreed to do so? Does a lion roar in the thicket when it has no prey? These images highlight that judgment does not come without cause. Chapters 4 and 5 are deeply convicting. In chapter 4, God reminds Israel of the many ways he tried to get their attention: drought, blight, and plague it. Still, you did not return to me. This refrain appears 5 times. God's discipline was not about punishment alone, it was meant to call the people back, but they refused. Then in chapter 5, Amos delivers one of the most famous and chilling indictments in the Bible. I despise your religious feasts. I cannot stand your assemblies, ... But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. This is God speaking. He is saying that he despises worship when it's not matched with righteous living. Singing, sacrifices, festivals, all of it means nothing if the poor are ignored and the courts are corrupt. God calls the people to seek me and live. This is the heart of Amos' message. True worship begins not at the altar, but in the streets, in how we treat one another. God's character is just, and his people must reflect that character in society. Chapters 6-9 reveal the extent of Israel's arrogance. They feel secure in their wealth, convinced that, because they are God's people, they are safe. But Amos warns, "Woe to you, who are complacent in Zion, ... You lie on beds inlaid with ivory and lounge on your couches, ... But you do not grieve over the ruin of Joseph." This is a piercing critique of those who are comfortable while others suffer. In chapter 7, Amos shares a series of visions: a swarm of locusts, a devouring fire, and a plumb line. The plumb line symbolizes how God will measure Israel by his standard, and they will be found crooked. In this chapter, we also meet Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, who tells Amos to go home and stop preaching. But Amos replies with one of the boldest statements of prophetic calling in Scripture: "I was neither a prophet nor a prophet's son, but the Lord took me from tending the flock and said to me, Go, prophesy to my people, Israel." Amos wasn't professionally trained. He wasn't part of the religious elite. He was a shepherd in a fig tree farmer, but God called him. This teaches us that God can use anyone who is faithful and willing to speak truth, especially when the truth is unpopular. In chapter 8, Amos describes a vision of a basket of ripe fruit, symbolizing that Israel's time is up. The end is near. The chapter ends with a haunting prophecy. "The days are coming, declares the sovereign Lord, when I will send a famine through the land, not a famine of food or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord." This is perhaps one of the most terrifying forms of judgment, not when God punishes, but when he goes silent. But the book of Amos does not end in despair. In Amos 9, God promises restoration. After judgment, there will be hope. He will restore David's fallen shelter, meaning the kingdom will be rebuilt. And God promises that a time will come when new wine will drip from the mountains, and all the hills will flow with it. This is a vision of abundance, of restoration, and of messianic hope fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Key teachings from the Book of Amos. God cares deeply about social justice. Worship without righteousness is empty. Privilege brings responsibility. God calls people from humble backgrounds to speak His truth. Complacency and comfort leads to spiritual blindness. Judgment is not God's final word. Why the Book of Amos still matters today. Amos challenges us to examine our faith, not just by how we worship, but by how we live. Are we seeking justice? Are we defending the poor? Are we ignoring suffering while we enjoy comfort? Amos reminds us that God sees the heart behind every offering, the motive behind every song, and the justice behind every law. His call is clear. Let your life overflow with righteousness. Let justice roll like a river.